A little over a year ago, I decided to visit Serbia to see some interesting sites in Belgrade and to visit some of the more usual Serbian churches, but I also wanted to see something a little more niche. It has to do with Saint Sergius and Saint Bacchus, who were Roman martyrs in the early church and who have also in recent years been sort of adopted by the gay community as an unofficial icon, an unofficial patron saint of gay couples. So originally I had planned on driving into Kosovo, northern Kosovo, which is mostly ethnic Serb, and seeing some of these Orthodox monasteries there because surprisingly, apart from Studenica, most of the most beautiful monasteries that have Serbian history were in the northern Kosovo area. And a friend I had in high school informed me, because he was Kosovar, that the border was in fact closed, and the only way to get there would be to take a bus from Belgrade down to these areas in Kosovo, which was impossible. I was already in Novi Pazar, but near Novi Pazar was the oldest church in the country, which I thought was beautiful. I went there and photographed that. But shortly afterwards, I went up to the monastery in Studenica, which is the main monastery of all Serbian churches. Pictures don't do Studenica any justice. You see a picture of a Serbian church and you think, oh, that's pretty. But in person, Studenica is 10 times more beautiful. I'm not even Orthodox. I'm not as religious as most people, but this is immediately what struck me. The monastery is in a beautiful valley surrounded by sloping mountains, thick forests. The church here is the mother of all Serb Orthodox monasteries, and it's made of this otherworldly white marble. Ancient graffiti covers the walls from the outside, and I could imagine soldiers returning and carving their names in the walls after World War I, after all of these battles with the Ottomans, and it made me really wish I could read their language. Outside of this main church, there's a series of walls built to house the monks and defend against the Ottoman invaders. Inside the church, there's evidence of the Ottomans in the past, damage to the priceless Byzantine frescoes. A Muslim back in the day would consider them idolatrous and would carve the face off of the fresco. So the face of Jesus and the face of many of the saints is chipped off. But important for my pilgrimage is the main church, which depicts St. Sergius and St. Bacchus in the ceiling. The saintly couple watches over the remains of Stefan Nemanjić, who was the first man to carve out a separate culture for the Serbs. He surrendered his title as first king of the Serbs to pursue a life as a monk, but is remembered through all of his icons, where he holds a miniature model of Studenica. Buried alongside Nemanjić is his son, Saint Simeon the Myrrh-streaming, whose relics for centuries would seep holy oil. Saint Sava, another son of Nemanjić, ended a civil war in Serbia by retrieving the relics of his brother and bringing them back to this monastery, where they still remain. They're now watched by the warrior saints Bacchus and Sergius. Sava, the other son of the father of all Serbs, is now recognized as the patron saint of Serbia. He has a strong influence on the monastery, shown with a white sash and black crosses. His main shrine now lies in the capital of Belgrade, the Church of Saint Sava. Clearly, the Serbs have been to war many times. They have a warring culture, and this continues up till recent history in Yugoslavia and Kosovo. It's fitting that protecting the remains of the icons of Simeon, Sava, and the father of all Serbs, Nemanjić, are frescoes of Bacchus and Sergius. I told their story a little bit in Spain, but I feel the need to tell it again. The earliest records of their martyrdom in Greek describe them as erastai, using the root word eros. Whether or not this relationship was physical, a description using this root implies a sort of sexual element. Compare this to the word agape, which is used in other saintly pairs and translates literally to brotherly love, which doesn't imply the same physical connection. Sergius was a general, and Bacchus appears to have been his subordinate. They made for a pretty well-known couple and were distinguished as soldiers, where they graduated from an academy in Trieste, and the Romans sent them to Cappadocia, a modern region in Turkey. The emperor knew them and requested them at the temple of Jupiter to perform a sacrifice. The pair refused to enter and denounced the Roman faith. The main target was Sergius, which is why his icon is most commonly seen. As a general, the Romans wanted to reform him. Civilians seeing their high-ranking officers convert could mean an uprising, so they made them both wear dresses and march hand-in-hand through the streets of Turkey or Cappadocia as punishment, hoping that their faith wasn't really that strong. When they said it only made them happier to be punished for Jesus, the emperor sent them to Rasatha, Syria. Because of his lower ranking, Bacchus was tortured to death in front of his partner. The Romans were mainly concerned with making their general turn back to their side, and they could expend a sergeant like Bacchus. When they tried to make dogs eat him in front of Sergius, the first miracle was performed. The dogs only protect his body from the buzzards. This was October 1st in 290 AD. Sergius began to question his faith in his prison cell, but had a vision. In some versions of the story, it was his partner Bacchus, and in others it was an angel. But in both, they told him that his death would be soon, and that he would be saved, so to hold out for a little while longer. The exact words recorded in all records of his martyrdom are, "I am still with you in the bond of our union." So when he finally refused to denounce his faith, the Romans nailed shoes with soles of iron spikes into his feet and forced him to limp for 18 miles, at the end beheading him. He died 6 days after Bacchus and was buried in Rasafa. Over the years, he became a patron of shepherds, nomads, and possibly spreading to Armenia, where he became St. Sarkis the General and their iconography. So important is his historical presence that the modern-day military rank of sergeant is most likely based off of him. These two saints with their unusual relationship were later adopted by LGBT congregations, but the Catholic Church struck them off the saintly calendar in 1969, only months after the Stonewall riots, citing a lack of evidence. But isn't religion based on faith alone and not proof? Even so, there's relics of these two saints in churches all across Europe and Asia. I planned my trip to Serbia to coincide with Belgrade Pride. I did this to highlight the two different faces of religious society. The Orthodox Church in Serbia is now a huge obstacle to open acceptance of this congregation, and they showed up to the protests, ironically, carrying icons of the saints mentioned in this video. Nemanja holding the monastery where this couple watches over his bones, and his son Sava, who risked his life to bring the body of his brother, another son of Nemanja, back to Studenica. All of these saints are watched over by Bacchus and Sergius. They chanted hymns calling the martyrs degenerates, scum, and funnily enough, Albanian race traitors, or so I was told. They flew modern banners of Russian ultranationalism, identifying with the Tsar, at the same time flying the flag of the Russian Federation. Odd to think that Putin served the Soviet Union in the KGB, but is now a hero of right-wingers for his treatment of LGBT. The same warped thinking is what leads Christians to turn their backs on the souls they should really be trying to save, and the brothers that they should be treating as equals.